Hello everybody, my name is Austin Flask and I will be presenting on a political play by Samuel Beckett called Endgame. Starting with a little bit of background for the author himself. He was born, Samuel Beckett was born in April 13th, 1906 and died in December 22nd, 1989. He was a playwright, director, novelist, poet, and literary translator. He lived most of his adult life in France, which actually is a very interesting fact because he was actually born in Ireland. And he wrote most of his plays in French and then translated them over to English before he published them or put them onto performances, to get a sense of absurdist and language barrier between both the words of English and French. But he was an advocate and a strong advocate of the Marxist system, mainly because like seen in our Marxist critique, he believed that the working class and everybody in the government society should actually work together and work with one another and actually overthrow the upper classes, the bourgeoisie, and the people in charge, as it were. However, that all changed as soon as Stalin took control over the Russia and the USSR. He thought that when Stalin gained control, he gained too much power, but he also does not like the United States. So he created this political play called Endgame to show how foolish and how absurd their squabbles during the Cold War actually was, and to show like what would happen if the Cold War turned into a little bit of an actual war and actually went nuclear. Now let's get into a couple characters. There's only 4 characters in this show. There's Ham, Clav, Neg, and Nell. Ham is a crippled old man who is also blind, and he's in a wheelchair at the very beginning of the show. He thinks himself to be above everybody else and throws people under the bus as much as he can and just stomps on them whenever he has the chance. And, however, he is crippled and blind, so he needs some people to actually do things for him. And that's where Clav comes into play. Clav is his manservant, somebody who does things for him, and if Clav was out of the system entirely, Ham would actually die. So Ham is a representation of the bourgeoisie and the governmental class. Clav, however, is a representation of the working man. Clav is underappreciated, hurting, and constantly being belittled and constantly being stepped on by Ham. Now let's get to the last 2 characters who are really fun. These are the parents of Ham. They have no legs and are in trash cans in the back of the far back of the show. And these 2 characters are the representation of the old working class. The working class that have been both maimed and hurt by the upper class and the governing body, to the point to where they can't actually walk or do anything for themselves anymore. But the characters are so important in Endgame, but what's even more important is the setting and the summary of the show as a whole. The setting of the show takes place in a property of Ham. However, it is disheveled, it is one room, and people constantly ask each other, why don't we go outside? Because the outside world is both poisoned, there is no more fish in the ocean, and in some aspect there could be some kind of nuclear disaster out there, to where they can only stay inside and they're slowly running out of food. Now, that's the setting. Now, if you look at some of the lines and some of the dialogue in the show, it makes absolutely no sense. I will be completely honest with you. So what you have to do is you have to analyze it from the idea of an absurdist mind. Each line has to be taken from the ideas of, okay, what would you do if you were in a post-apocalyptic world and you have no responsibilities, nothing to do, and you're stuck in one room? That's basically the entire show. But I see you all thinking, what does this have to do with today's society? Well, we can talk about the obvious one. already had a conversation about World War III in here, and I believe a few weeks ago everybody was up in an uproar about something happening in Iran. But that's not the only thing. The other thing is our overzealousness and over-dominance that we find both in the United States through our nationalist beliefs and thinking we're ourselves to be overly dominant over everybody. And that gives us a sense of arrogance. And if we start thinking ourselves to be better than the person we're going to be fighting, we may find ourselves to be losing yet another war, maybe like Vietnam. But that brings me to my last point, which is the absurdist world as a whole. The world in itself is absurd and has many things that we do not understand or do not recognize throughout. So, in a sense that there is a underlining theme of what's going to happen next and who is going to be in control.